than your currency. Splurge your millions buying houses like Monopoly. Fucking 9 to 5, man, the money is.
Hey guys and girls, welcome to this week's episode of the No BS with Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Birch, and this is the show unravelling the truth to the facade of the 21st century. We're now exiting the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. Today, I want to talk about a topic that I thought about the other day. I briefly talked about it on another podcast, but I was thinking about what would happen, how could I reproduce what I've done, right? And there's so many haters out there that go, oh, Birchy, you're lucky, or people said back in the old days, oh, you're going to crash, you're going to go bankrupt, you're not going to get ahead, you're a faker, whatever the case may be. You've been helped by your parents must have helped you, all of this sort of stuff. So I've heard heaps of shit over the years, good, bad, indifferent, and building a portfolio to 230 plus properties plus 30 odd pubs and motels and hotels and whatnot, and all my businesses and all that sort of stuff. It hasn't just been an overnight sort of thing that's been like, okay, great, it's just happened. It's like all these small steps, all these small habits, which is what I talked about previously, getting the habits right for your goals to get you to where you want to be. So thinking about the other day, I was driving through Western Sydney and I was like, shit, wonder what properties are selling for. And I drove past a couple of my properties and I went and had a look at them just for the fun of it. And then I went on to realestate.com and checked out what they're selling for. And I made myself feel good because I was like, well, my properties have gone up by another $100,000 each. And you can do the calculations, get your calculator out and calculate a couple hundred properties, 50 grand equity, 50 grand growth, whatever. It all adds up. And sitting there thinking about it, I'm always upset, right? There's an opportunity cost because the biggest costly mistakes have been the opportunity cost, the costs that I didn't, the steps that I didn't take, the actions that I didn't do, the things that I could have done better. And, I have mixed emotions when I think about it because I'm like, wow, it's really cool. I've done great things. And then at the same time, I'm like, wow, I really fucked up. I could have bought another 10 or could have bought another 20. Imagine if I had this. Imagine if I'd done that. But the reality of it is that I know that I did the best on my day that I had to get me to where I am today. And those steps that I took were very calculated, they were very educated, and they were the steps that I needed to take in order to get myself to where I wanted to be at this point. So I was thinking about it, if I had to start off again, because a lot of people will be watching this in 2022 and going, wow, Birchy, like, you're getting old, B did this shit years ago, like, how can I do it now? Things are different, right? Let me go back a bit and explain what was different back then. So we can sit here now and go, house prices are very expensive. The yields aren't the best. Well, going back 20 years ago, interest rates were nearly 20%. Nearly 10%. I remember fixing my interest rates in a unit. I bought a unit in Mount Druitt for $160,000. It was only 10 years old. It's probably worth about $400,000 now, so it's gone up double and a half, and maybe almost gone up triple actually. And it was renting for $150, $160 per week. The rental market was very soft. The strata was about $3,000 a year. It's probably about $4,000 a year now. And when you run the calculations on a 8.65% interest rate on a $150,000 loan, which is what I took out on the thing at the time, it was quite negative. It was like $100 a week negative. And I could have sat there and said, well, it's very hard. It may never go up. It's in the slums, whatever the case may be. But that property has gone up. I put in there maybe $20,000 deposit in that property, and that property's gone up from maybe 300, 250, 300,000. So literally that $20,000 that I put into it has now gone up 10 times. So if you really want to look at it from that perspective, it's gone up. What could have given you a 10-time return in the last 15 years? But I did fix it at an interest rate at that level. It was very heavily negative geared at the time. Well, for me and my salary at $40,000 a year, it was very ugly. Yes, you could say Bitcoin would have been better. This was probably before Bitcoin, and I didn't know about Bitcoin until about 2014. But looking at that market, people could sit here and say, well, at 400,000, it's too expensive. At 300,000, it's too expensive. What will you be saying when it's worth $1 million? Because I've seen all these markets rise. I've seen all these things change. Some markets are very overvalued in the current climate. Some are very undervalued in around this country. What would I do if I had to start again? That's the whole point of this discussion today. What would I do if I had to start again? Let me tell you, I wouldn't be going out to Mount Druitt in Western Sydney and paying $800,000 for a property that rents for $300 per week. The deal is shit at that level. Those deals are no good. The day has gone, right? I never sat here in 2002, 2003 and said, I wish I had have bought a property in 1992 because it would have been better. It could have been 10 years beforehand. I would have been able to buy in Parramatta in the eastern suburbs or wherever the case may be. I just did whatever the fuck I needed to do on that day. And that was to buy assets that I could see potential for them to go up in value. I used to think that they go up in value because the market's so great and, you're buying it and the area goes up, which that's probably half the equation, but the other half of it is that everything gets inflated away because our currency is continuously being crashed. So there's certain things that I've learned over the last 20 years of investing that if I had to start again tomorrow, I'd be able to get much quicker to where I am today. But at the same time, there's lots of things that don't work and are redundant, but there's things that are very fundamental. So, just as much as someone could whinge and say, I can't buy a house in Mount Druitt in Western Sydney, who gives a fuck? I never wanted to buy there anyway. I didn't like driving out there. It used to be very rough. People used to get bashed. People used to get rolled. People used to have rocks thrown at their cars. They probably still do, but it's not as bad as what it was, right? But what is better today? We've got interest rates. You can go get a loan at 2 to 3%. Imagine you go get a loan on an $800,000 purchase, $800,000 at a 3% interest rate, 3/8 of $24,000 a year it would cost you to hold that property. At a $200,000 purchase price at 8% interest rate, that would have been $16,000 per year. Your rent would have been $200 per week, not $350 per week. So as much as you can pick a market apart and say it's bad or good or whatever the case is, you can sit there and cry and say how much of a loser you are because you can't do it, or you can go, shit, well, there's my strategy. What would I do in order to get that strategy today? So I wouldn't be buying in Sydney. There's areas around this country, whether it be in Perth, whether it be in Cairns, whether it be in Townsville, whether it be anywhere along the eastern seaboard, western seaboard, wherever it is, there's markets that used to be selling for more 10 years ago, right? So literally the other day I picked up a house for someone. It was $200,000 in a very large capital city. It was $200,000 for a house and previously had sold for $285,000. So it was like I was picking up a property 10 years later for 30% discount to what it was 10 years ago. So if I missed out on that whole decade, I'm coming back today and picking it up for much cheaper than what some idiot would have paid a decade ago. So if it was me rebuilding my portfolio, I'd still use the fundamental calculations of what I needed, but I would just replace it with different assets. I don't buy properties out in Mount Druitt. When I say buy properties in Mount Druitt, I built my portfolio out there, but I don't buy them today at $1 million a house. I bought them when they were $150,000, $200,000 a house because that's where the market was at the time. Just as going back 5 years ago, I went and picked up half a dozen to a dozen sort of acreages on 5-acre blocks out in the northwest district of Sydney, where they're like 5 acres for $1 million, 5 acres for $1.5 million. Now to get 5 acres, you're looking at $5 million to get 5 acres in those areas. So those things have had great significant growth. Would I go and spend $5 million for 5 acres today? Absolutely fucking not. Stupid, right? The cash flow would be so negative, you go under just for buying that with a loan. But, where else would I be looking at? I'd be looking for markets which are undervalued. I'd be looking for markets which have significant upside for growth. I'd be looking for markets which are below replacement cost of the asset. If you're buying a house on land anywhere in Australia for $200,000 or less, you can't build it for that. You can't even build a granny flat for $200,000 now. I'm going to get into it in a different video about why I don't actually build properties in 2021 because it's not profitable. But looking at the sort of markets that I would go to, I would still go buy properties that are below market value. I'd still buy properties that have a positive cash flow. If the rent is $300 per week and you can pick it up for $200,000, it'll be pretty decent. If you can pick up something for $150,000 and it's worth $200,000 and it rents for $300 per week, you're getting yourself a 10% cash flow on it, and you're buying at $50,000 below market value, meaning that you've got a 25% equity in that deal. You can go back, pull out your capital and go again and move on to the next deal. The part going through any market cycle, whether it's today's market cycle, whether it's 10 years ago or 20 years ago, or whether it'll be in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, the whole trick of this game of real estate, some people think, I want to flip it, right? They buy a property, they buy it for 200, sell it for 300, make 100, they feel really well off because they made 100,000, but then the property goes from 300 to $1 million. All right? There's no point. That $100,000 is totally irrelevant. You can try and trade your way out of this market, but the game is rigged. It's the money that they're using that's causing the values of these assets to rise. It's not the property that's so great. It's the money that they're printing, or the currency that they're printing is better off, but they call it money, but it's currency. The dollars that we use is losing its value, which in turn is pushing up the asset prices. So the game for me of real estate is to buy as much shit that I can and take it through the market cycle. If you have $1 million worth of property and it doubles to $2 million, wow, you've made $1 million. It might sound a lot today, but just as 100,000 sounded a lot 2 decades ago as well, in the future, what would that look like? So as an investor, if you could have $1 million of one asset or $5 million of a different asset, if the market doubled, would you want to turn the 1 million to 2 million or the 5 million to 10 million? For me, I'd be looking for the same fundamental result and the same fundamental strategy that I had to get me to where I am today by going into the future. So if I was to rebuild my portfolio today, could I redo it? 110%. I know of hundreds of investors which have started out with 50 grand, 100 grand, 150 grand, zero money, but 100 grand in their existing property. And in the course of the last 12, 24 months, be able to get to double digits in their property portfolio. So is it possible? Yes. Is it possible to do it the same way I did it 2 decades ago? Absolutely not. Is it the same way that people 2 decades ago, and this is something to really sit back and think, because I see all these moping, whinging people that go, oh, it's too hard, I can't do it, whatever. And, you know, I'm not sitting here from my ivory tower. I'm pretty basic with my basic T-shirt, right? I still had issues 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Still have issues today because I can't get enough of this shit, right? I want to keep buying more and more and more. But I've never sat there and gone, people, and this is something you have never, ever, ever heard me say or come out of my mouth, is I've never even fucking thought of it, right? People from 10 years before I bought my first property, I don't even know what the fuck they bought, right? But they would have got a hell of a lot more value on bang for their buck. If I sit back and really think about it, you could have bought 5 acres in Kellyville for $400,000 back in the day. But I've never sat there and gone, oh, well, I couldn't be successful because I couldn't buy that. I've gone, well, this is the best of what I could do. And I've taken every step possible in my capacity. And it was me against me. It wasn't me against some other dude that did something beforehand. It wasn't me about someone else that's going to do something better in the future. It was me against my personal best to get me to where I wanted to be. And I think that that's really important for a lot of people that may be starting out. They may be sitting there thinking in 2022, oh, it's all too hard, it's all fucking gone, because out of everybody, imagine me going through Western Sydney going, fuck, this market is terrible, right? That is coming out of my mouth, right? I went through Western Sydney and I was like, I can't see anything here of good value. I really couldn't. So if someone asked me, Nathan, I want to go buy a house to live in today, unless you're selling your house that you've done really well out of and you just want to go buy another house that's, you know, going to be a little bit better, you're going to find it very tough. Even if you're upgrading, right? You're selling your house, it used to be $500,000 and it's gone to $1 million, and then you're going to buy a new house. That house that used to be $1 million is now worth $2 million. You're going to have to gap up a lot and then, you know, pay a lot more money in order to get into that bigger asset. So it would have been better off you buying that asset before the market. So in essence, it would be better if the whole market crashed. I'd be the happiest guy in the world because I'd go and pick up more assets on the cheap. But if you ever think that the property market is going to crash, let's go back and have a look at why it won't crash. Cost of building, right? And I'm actually just going to add this into this podcast as well. A cost of building in 2021 and 2022 has gone astronomical, through the roof. I actually have heard from builders that are going into administration, that are going bankrupt, and they can't make money. They've quoted on a build that could have been $400,000, and it's going to cost them $500,000 to build it because the cost of materials have gone up by 100%. Cost of timber, cost of gyprock, cost of plumbing equipment, cost of labour, cost of everything has gone up in the last 12 months. So the value of everything has risen so greatly, it does make it much more unaffordable to be able to build that thing. So people sit there and think, okay, now that we've got a house price for a shitty old fibro house at $1 million or $900,000 as the entry point into Sydney, that might fall down to $500,000. Well, if it falls to $500,000, let me tell you, every single tradie will be out of a job. Every single, real estate agent will be out of a job. It's probably not a bad thing either. No hate to my real estate friends. I'm joking. But if it fell, the whole market would crash, right? This system needs to be pumped up on cheap, available credit for the system to keep going forward. So we're now sitting at a point where cost of building is going up by the month sort of thing. So if you bought a block of land 2 years ago and you're like, wow, I'm going to build a house on it, whatever, you come to build it, you may not be able to build your house anymore because the cost of building has gone up. The builder may not be able to build for you because they might go bankrupt because the cost of materials have gone up, or they can't get access to those materials. So if you have a house and all the parts that cost to build that house are above what you paid for it, well then how's that property going to go down in value? Because they're going to have to either not be enough properties, they're going to have to keep building enough to keep up to that. But the cost of inflation is too far high. So looking at getting into the market, some people will sit there and go, Sydney prices too expensive. I agree with you, but I didn't buy my properties in Sydney, in Western Sydney, because they were the best things. That was all I could afford. It was the best thing that I could afford. So if you can't afford to buy that, what is the best thing that you can afford today to get yourself close to your goals? What are your goals? What is your strategy? Have you worked that out yet? I've just done a recent podcast, which either before or after this one, which will be talking about goal setting, goal planning, and what are your goals? How are you going to be able to kick ass with your goals moving forward in the next 12, 24, 36 months? It's an amazing time, amazing amounts of opportunity out there. If it was me today, I'd be doing everything identical to what I did, but the asset that I would be buying, I'd just have to be going with the market to find the best value asset that could meet the criteria of what I need to have happen. So I need to buy properties that are below market value, have upside for capital growth, have a strong cash flow, and ultimately the fourth one, which is my newest thing, which is below the cost of rebuilding. So you can't build shit for 200. So if you buy anything less than 200, you're doing amazing. If you can buy something for $100,000 in the current market, you're doing really amazing. If you can buy it for less than $100,000, you're stealing it. Little fun fact as a departure from today's podcast, I recently just sold my Ford Ranger Raptor. I paid $74,000 for that thing. A year ago, I sold it for $73,000. I added 65,000 Ks on the clock. It needed new tires, needed a service. And, that's what happened with inflation. Everything is rising in value. If you can buy a property for $100,000, you're basically buying yourself a Ford car, Ford Ute for that sort of money. So, look for the value in the property. Make sure you're buying assets that are below replacement cost. And there's probably like 90% of the equation just covered in just that. If you need help with planning your portfolio, reach out to my team, speak to one of my investor relation managers, see if you can have a bit of a strategy session with them to see what is possible, and they can put you on to other areas of my business if you need help on those fronts. But yeah, if you need help with anything, 1300 367 925. Remember to share, subscribe, give us a like if you like this video and podcast. And always, you can check into us every Tuesday at YouTube, at Facebook, at Spotify, at Google Play. And yeah, keep being awesome, guys. We'll catch up soon and look forward to hearing your story of kicking ass with your goals in 2022. Bye for now.
Like Bilal said, man, we stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take it. The dollar about to die, soon to be hyperinflated. This my 2 cents, don't care if you save it. Joint be decentralized and you will see you've been lied to the whole time, and it's the irony, cause they do the exact opposite. You become a slave to the system, enough your money, all they do is profit. There's no conspiracy theory, you better hear me. Crypto will set you free before the system does. I don't care if you do or you don't, but what I'm saying is the truth to the reason you choke. I've never been a failure, excuse my behavior. Keep talking, haters doing me a favor. And you're telling lies, I know what they been telling you. I'm the opposite, the Donald Trump of Australia. It's amazing, here for the taking. My time is never wasted, just getting wasted. These girls say I'm really breathtaking. I can't help it if I really misbehaving.